If you've got a question, the voices of resin are here. Oh, PlastChicks.
PlastChicks is an SPE sponsored podcast.
Hey, Lynzie, how's it going?
I am just lovely. How are you?
Good. I'm super excited for this interview that we have today.
I'm really excited too, and I told my husband about it, and I was like, "You don't understand," and he admitted no, he didn't understand why it was this big of a deal. But
I had a morning meeting, so we have two. Our company is now two. It's two companies becoming one, and so we have a morning meeting every other day, and I told the whole morning meeting before everybody was able to run out. I was like, no, everybody wait, hold on. Like, guess what is happening today? and so anyway, I'm Mercedes Landazuri. I'm Color Lab Technology Director at Peacock Colors and Vortex Liquid Color.
And I am Lynzie Nebel, and I am an upstream quote engineer for Cytiva. It's a very new title, so give me a couple weeks to practice it.
And we met through our volunteer work, association work with Society of Plastics Engineers, who generally sponsors this podcast. And with our powers combined, we are PlastChicks, the Voices of Resin. So you can listen to our podcast anywhere you digest your podcasts. You can find them on SPE's YouTube page, or you can go to 4spe.org/podcast and listen to us there. iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all of those, but yes. Google Podcasts, all of them. But yes, enough about us. So today we are very, very lucky to have with us here Hugh Karraker. If you don't know who he is the great grandson of Leo Baekeland, who was the inventor of the first plastic made from synthetic materials. So legend. And also with us today, we have John Maher, who is the director of the film, the documentary, All Things Bakelite. And we are having them on today, especially because they're going to be releasing that film for streaming on June 29th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. That was a very long intro, but just I needed some background in case some of our listeners don't know what Bakelite is. But yes, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. So, I mean, getting started, I'm a plastics engineer. I went to school at Penn State, and, one of the first classes we have before you see the machines, before you, see any of the materials, anything like that, is it's not a formal history of plastics, but it's a general, this is kind of how the plastics industry came to be thing. So, Hugh, I gotta admit, I'm fangirling real hard right now. Because, this is I hear about you pretty much my first plastics class that I ever had. And now I'm here short years later, not as many as LinkedIn or other things will tell you. So I'm excited. And, so you guys have worked together on this movie called All Things Bakelite. And really it kind of delves into that initial story that I was first told in college. How did this come to be? Where did you guys decide that this is a movie you wanted to make?
Well, my mother had the family archives, and when she passed away, she gave them to me. She had wanted to write the biography, but never got to it. So I decided to make the movie. And I used her notes, her letters, Baekeland's letters, photographs, and gave them to John after a little bit of what he calls the dance of the tarantulas. I let him explain that. So when we first met, John and I had had to get together and see eye to eye on the theme of the movie. I'll let John explain that more. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, yeah, the Dance of the Tarantulas has to do with when you first link up with people in any kind of enterprise, but particularly filmmaking, I think, because it's such a, it amplifies all the human characteristics. When you first meet someone and you're thinking, well, maybe we should work together on this film, whatever their good or bad personality features, I think are like magnified by times 10 when you get into the nitty gritty of filmmaking, which is extremely time consuming and energy. You know, making a film is like it's a big flywheel that just wants to sit there. It's got a huge mass and you've got to start pushing it and getting it turning and finding the right people. So that's what I call the Dance of the Tarantulas, where you learn about individuals and see if they are trustworthy and capable and have a sense of humor, and you can work with them. And I think you and I hit it off pretty quickly. I actually hired him to dance with his wife in an earlier history film I was doing. So it turned out that he and his wife, Sherry, they're terrific dancers, much better than me. And so they danced in an earlier film. And I think after that, you was spying on me to see how my project went, whether I was able to stay on budget and not like, you know, have gunfire between the crew members, things like that. So we started our research phase. We went to the Smithsonian. We did a very important roundtable, what we call I call a roundtable discussion with some research chemists that were at Dow, that was formerly, was at Bound Brook, I think in New Jersey.
Union Carbide.
Yeah, formerly Union Carbide. And I made them crazy with my take on, I really wanted to knock this out of the box that maybe a chemist sits in. And like I asked questions like, what would the world be like without Bakelite, without plastic? And we got a lot of good basic information from that early discussion. So, and we just started working on it. We started putting the elements together and interviewing. We lucked out, I think, with really good people to interview, and we got some terrific material, and we had some archive film, and you know, it's a big melting pot that you put together. So
Yeah, I mean, something just as you're talking, you know, knocking it out of like the box that chemists, and now we're already off of the agenda, but one of my favorite quotes from the film was I think where was she working? There was a woman who worked for IBM, I think.
Jamie Garcia.
Yes. Yeah. So she said, I think it was her that said Bakelite is a very elegant molecule, in that you're starting with something very simple, and when you react it, you end up with a very complex system with lots of different interconnectivity within the molecule itself. You know, but so that is like, you know, maybe the chemist's take, and so it's like that's like very like, you know, very deep, but also just blowing it out and making it accessible to, well, you know, people like I was 6 years ago who didn't, like, as the film also mentions, plastic is almost kind of invisible because it is everywhere, you know, that we don't even see what it is. We don't even recognize it for what it is. So with that, I guess, what were some of the initial applications for Bakelite, and are there any applications where it's still used today?
They were used for automobile parts, the distributor caps and ignition systems needed to be not conduct electricity. So those were the early parts, and they're still being made out of Bakelite, brake pistons and water pumps, and various parts of cars are made out of Bakelite.
Yeah, I did love when you guys are talking about in the movie how the electrical coils were, you know, the shellac was melting.
Right.
And I'm an upstate New York kind of girl, so I love a good shout out to Niagara Falls. My family's from Buffalo. And like, it's cool because at that time, there was all this innovation and, forward movement with, engineering and electricity in the Buffalo area. Buffalo is like one of the first cities to be all electric, and like to also be incorporating Bakelite into that that infrastructure at the same time. Just a melting of two loves of mine.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about in the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that the world was trying to harness this demon, this magical servant / demon, electricity. And one of the reasons that Bakelite really was scored big early is that they were trying to increase the voltages, the amperage levels that could be carried in coils and wires, and the sheathing they had before was just burning up. And so when Bakelite came in, they covered a copper wire with Bakelite and discovered that it was a tremendously good conductor. And we actually did a little experiment. We built a little kind of a archetypal film interior of a thing. I don't know what you would call it, a coil inside a radio or something. It was actually a little world we created up at the Broadcast Museum, Communications Museum near Hartford, and the guys were great there. One of the problems when you're doing filmmaking, you really ask weird questions, and you have to do strange things, and people think sometimes you're a little nuts. But I said, I need to create this scene with this coil basically melts down, and they're looking at me, and then one guy had a twinkle in his eye and said, "You mean we get to blow something up?" I said, "Yes, we do." We actually blew out all the power in the laboratory, in the museum, in doing the shot. So we had to do it over and rewire.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. But everybody
that's a
got
good
into
blooper.
it. Everybody really got into building this little world, and then setting the camera up so it would go into the coil just as it was starting to heat up and exploding. So that's fun. And again, that's what I call a sticky part of a film, that you remember stuff like that, and that's part of the job of a filmmaker.
Yeah, and just such a key application, especially for, just where what plastics have enabled. That's how we're talking right now, to the internet, right? We wouldn't have that if the coils were all burning. But and we talk about, and actually, Lynzie, you'd mentioned, with the electricity and Bakelite, really happening, really ramping up at the same time. And then Hugh, in the film, and John, you guys talked about how Leo was at the right place at the right time, and so that reminds me of that. But also, let's talk about some of the company that he kept. Some of his contemporaries, like Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, the Wright brothers, and Henry Ford. Right? It was this really, really burgeoning time for the Industrial Revolution, of course, right? So did he actually? Was he actually? So he was contemporary of those people. Did he actually have meetings with these people? Did they know each other? Did they chill? Did they like watch? I don't know, the baseball game.
He was a little later than Thomas Edison, but and those guys were making they had made their inventions before he made his. So his invention satisfied some of the problems that they all had.
There's a great journal entry that I think actually Leo's wife Celine put down one morning. Alex Bell called on the telephone this morning.
Wow.
And he actually ended up being a family member, didn't he? You? Alexander
Bell. No, he married a good friend. His daughter married a good friend of Leo's.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Wow, that's wild. And so Celine was so Leo's wife. I love that in the film. Her nickname was Bumble, right?
A solid nickname.
And so, which is clearly where they got the name for the app. Definitely, just everything comes back to Bakelite. But now, why? So Leo was born, or at least lived in Ghent, in Europe, and but he moved to Yonkers. Why specifically Yonkers?
Easy access to Manhattan.
Gotcha.
And up the river, he loved the river. He had a boat on the river, a yacht.
Uh-huh.
So he's a big boater. And I think he grew up on a river in Ghent, Belgium. And
Oh
he's
wow.
a big sailor.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I actually basically for the very same reasons that's why I lived in Yonkers. But I went to college there, so it was cool to find out that was where Bakelite was invented.
Right next door to the big estate up there, the Untermeyer estate.
Untermeyer, yeah.
So now in the film, you do touch on the after Bakelite started to take off, there were a lot of patent infringers, and it mentions that Leo was very crafty with his patent writing, and really that's why it was able to take off so much that he ended up absorbing some of the competition. How did he where and how did he learn his crafty
Where
patent
did that
writing?
foresight come from? Because I feel like even today there are people that write patents that are not very thoughtful like that.
And a very crafty attorney, Charles Townsend, I think, became his attorney. And they know the words to use.
And I guess he had been through, I mean, Bakelite was not his first really big invention that took off, right? It was preceded, as you mentioned in the film, by Velox, right? It was the, so which he then sold to Eastman for, what was it? Was it really, I was looking into it, was it really $750,000?
Yes, but back in those days, that was worth a couple of million.
Yeah, yeah.
Pre-tax too. There was no income tax back then. 1899, we're talking.
Wow.
And on the train up to see George Eastman, he was wondering, what should I ask for this company? 10,000, maybe 15,000. And he was banding about these numbers, which turned out to be very low. And he said, I'm just going to let Eastman make an offer. And George Eastman said, how about we do this? Which actually there's some estimates that it was up to $1 million. To take the company. And of course, sometimes it's good to keep your mouth shut, right?
He had to share the money with his two partners.
I could
But
put a couple million.
He was able to build a Snug Rock, or not build, but buy and refurbish a wonderful mansion right on the Hudson River that had a barn next door, a kind of a garage barn that he converted into an amazing laboratory.
So really that puts him in the category of all those, what Amazon started in a barn, well, a garage.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Google, you got all those great garage/barn starting companies. So I'm going to go ahead and just slap Bakelite right in there.
Yeah, actually, I never thought of that. You're right. It has that cachet of being, and one of the things I think about is if Leo Baekeland could discover plastic in a barn, why can't all these legions of laboratories and corporate chemical companies come up with a way to get control of plastic in terms of the of the plastic misuse that's going on, biodegradability. Why does it seem that innovation often happens, not always, but often happens by the individual small guy? And I think Leo also had a little inferiority complex, being an immigrant from Belgium, and I think he really wanted to prove himself, and he did.
That drive to, that little bit of inferiority complex, I feel like just fosters so much.
Oh, it carries me far, I'll tell you that.
Well, the other thing was what we mentioned, as he's described in the film, is just and he had the revelation, right, where he felt like he would be most successful if he just picked one thing and just focused on that. And then also the side of his personality where he was just incredibly relentless and very, very meticulous with all of his documentation of his experiments. So it's sometimes to innovate, you have to be obsessed in this very single-minded way. But the other cool thing that I, I think one person described it in the film as like, where other people saw a wall, Leo leaned against the wall and found a door. But I'm like, no, it didn't seem like he was leaning against the wall. He was like pushing every
Scratching
single
and-
little like
Yeah.
piece of that door, trying to find because he knew it was there. He sniffed it out. And going back to like right place at the right time. He didn't start
Okay.
in the right place at the right time, right? Was Ghent going to be the right place for him? Was he going to be able to innovate there?
There was a who's who of chemistry in Europe in the late 1800s that couldn't solve this thing called the phenolic resin problem, and they all gave up. And Leo thought there was something there, and he just figured a way to make it work when all these other guys who were really top names in chemistry couldn't figure it out. So there's the stubbornness coming in. How long did he work on it? Was it 4 or 5 years straight in the barn?
Yep.
Yeah. So.
And you said, he kept really detailed notes and journals. Was he like writing about this like every day? Like, I feel like I would get frustrated and I'd be like, didn't find anything today. I am mad. And I'd just like go into bed. What were those notes like?
We saw them in the Smithsonian, and they're pretty detailed.
Yeah.
I think he just was, maybe a form of meditation in the sense that every day at the end of the day, he would go up into the turret of his house in the Yonkers up in that Avery up above and reflect upon the day's work. And you know how it is, sometimes you have a problem, you lay in bed at night and you think about it from 4 or 5 different angles, and finally you fall asleep, and then maybe you wake up again and make another note. And he was just that kind of person.
What is the house and lab still there?
No, it burned down in 1957.
Oh man,
Shame.
One interesting note, if I may put in, we did a lab scene. We actually built our own little version of Leo's lab, and no one can argue about the authenticity of the glassware because it's Hugh Karraker here had all the original glassware.
Well,
or
some
most of it.
was original.
Yeah, so it's like the original. We're looking at the actual glassware that discovered plastic.
That's really
wow. I'm like, yeah, goosebumps. Like that's so cool. And you don't know that, in the film, when you're watching it. That's really, really cool. So and Lynzie, you had touched on the kind of inferiority complex or and John, coming being that immigrant mentality. One point in the film that really struck me, talks about how successful he was and how successful Bakelite was, but then it also mentions that like in his later years he was peevish and discouraged. Why?
Well, I think those words are a little strong. He was upset about the business side of Bakelite. And then, his son didn't want to take over the business, so he sold it. And after that, he never got back to the lab. He went and discovered botany.
Wow.
Bought a house in Florida on Millionaires Row. Became friends with Fairchild, David Fairchild, the famous botanist, and he learned how to grow exotic fruits like ashi, Jamaican food, and fruits and vegetables, and he was almost as scientific about plants as he was about Bakelite.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame that he didn't, just sell the company early, and with all these millions, put his efforts into botany or microbiology or whatever his brain was racing. But he almost had these, and I liken them to little mini breakdowns every couple of months up at the Bakelite business in New York, and he just had to get away, and he'd go down on his boat to Florida and kind of center himself and then go back up. But I don't think he could let it go. I don't think he didn't want so many people that discover something or have a business. Think of all the family businesses that have trouble passing it down to the kids, because those kids don't know how to run it like I do, type of mentality. And to some extent, I think, Bakelite, it was his baby and he didn't want to give it away really to anyone.
And I mean, it's unfortunate, that, he didn't have someone who wanted to take it over. Because I see this industry itself has a lot of, family owned companies with, the parents running the company and, the kids taking it over as the next generation. That would have been a cool kind of tradition to be started with the actual first plastic,
Yeah.
So do any of the do any of Leo's descendants still actively work in the plastics industry today that you're aware of?
There's a marine biologist. His Baekeland's grandson was a psychiatrist, and my other nephew is managing a biotech lab in California. So no scientists, lots of artists, and people who just enjoy life, writers, but no scientists.
And you say, and you mentioned that there are lots of artists, and you can kind of feel that if this was, I don't know if it was more Hugh, if it was more your influence and vision, or John, if it was more yours, but all of the great music in the film, all of the great original songs that kind of serve as like an interlude or like a little break from the the science part of it, right? It's really refreshing. So was that more Hugh's doing, or was it more John's vision?
Well, John was the creator of all those fun things in the movie.
Yeah, I only did the fun stuff. Now I'm very blessed to have Craig Mkhitaryan as my editor now, a long time, we've worked together for 20 years or more. And then Marty Fiji as a composer. All the films I do have all an original score, so it's all scored. And so it's sometimes it's hard to work with Marty. I mean, we have our moments, but in general, it basically comes down to, I can't do this because I don't know how to do music. I have a feeling for what I want to hear, but I said, you've got to do it. And so we have a good relationship. I've known Marty for over 30 years and Craig, the editor, for 25 years. So they bring a lot to the party, and so the other thing is this guy here, Hugh Karraker, has annoyingly good suggestions. And I think the whole idea as a filmmaker, as a director, is just sort of just be the orchestra leader and combine all this. And sometimes it's a matter of getting out of people's way, And
Bakelite itself has a music of its own. You notice in the movie, there's a guitar made of Bakelite. There's a castanets,
right?
The sound of Bakelite. And the pool balls, where you shoot pool, the sound of the balls breaking is music to my ears.
Right. Well, and it was so cool too, like, getting into that side, and really, which is not the sciencey side, but really like embracing it from the design perspective. You have who was the professor from Pratt? Who spoke?
Posh.
Yes. So it was just like, one of the most, had some of the most beautiful descriptions of Bakelite, and really blew my mind that she said without Bakelite we couldn't have a streamlined design, this style that appeared, from in the United States in the 1930s. That was like from the Art Deco, but like this shiny surfaces. It really, I mean, you can. So thinking about, I think I saw a presentation, an architect talking about plastics, and he said if you map out the history of building materials, all of the thousands of years, into a 365-day calendar, with the clay brick being the first one, right? plastic has only been around for 2 days,
Wow.
and we have only, and so we're really only scratching the surface. And all of the ways that you can alter plastics, and the aesthetic and mechanical properties is just so far beyond anything else that came before it, right? And it's just the beginning.
Well, yeah, she says Bakelite changed the way things looked, and it's hard to calculate what that really means, even because I think we take in that whole feel of Bakelite, not intellectually, but almost through our souls. I actually had a line that I wrote for the film called, what is the heart of Bakelite? And Jorge Caicedo, one of our first interviews, says, every material has a heart, and I love that sensibility. I like that. Think of it.
Yeah, it's definitely the designer. The designers. What CMF does, the color material finish designers think about, like, what is this material? How does it want to be used?
Yeah, I know that baby monitor.
Oh yes,
baby monitor.
that was so. Oh, and with Noguchi was like, it blew my mind. It was like he did like this guy because he did that famous, the Noguchi table, which is like huge mid-century modern, like you'd recognize it if you've never seen it before. But sorry, go ahead, Lynzie. But he also designed like the first baby monitor.
Yeah,
right?
I just love that it's that, like, that practical, like, essentially salt of the earth, product, because you need, and before that you didn't need it, but now you really can't function without a baby monitor if you have a baby. And the fact that the incorporation of, like, oh, well, it kind of looks like a mother's face or a nurse's face or something like that. I just thought that was so, there was, you couldn't have done that before. That was just like, here is this first step. Not only we're going to take it into a practical application for something that you need, but now we're also going to take into the emotional, like, aspects of what you need also. We're just kind of forging these two paths concurrently. And, talking about other materials, there really isn't that much that can do that across that many boards.
Yeah, try to make a baby monitor out of sheet metal. Go ahead, try it. Interesting little footnote on the baby monitor. Ismio Noguchi was Japanese, and that was developed in the mid to late 30s after the Lindbergh kidnapping got everybody really curious about safety and security. After World War II, or no, actually during World War II, right after the attack on Pearl Harbor, a lot of those baby monitors were destroyed, anti-Japanese sentiment. So there's very few of them around. Isn't that interesting?
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah. Wow. Like, now I can't really, I couldn't imagine that, that sort of sentiment, like.
Yeah, well.
Well, and it was probably, they were thinking, of espionage too, if it's like,
well, that's true,
any kind of,
Yeah.
Wow. But wow,
that's so. Had to pull this up while we were shooting, and it turns out to be, it's quite heavy because this is 30s radio technology essentially. And so it had tubes and coils wrapped in Bakelite, of course. But yeah, so a lot of sub stories.
Do you actually have one, or was that from the Smithsonian?
Got one from a collector.
Loan from a collector in New York City.
Yeah, very few of them around though now. So
speaking of a lot of sub stories, what is like one of your, or if we can have enough time for this, if you guys each have, what's your favorite Leo or Bakelite story that you couldn't include in the film, that just didn't have time or the space?
Interesting. I don't know that I think we got pretty much everything really we wanted to. I mean, I think some of the things that I dug was him walking into his pool fully clothed.
Yeah.
And everybody laughed at him, except he got the last laugh because he used evaporation for the whole day to cool himself off. So
the one story I remember, John, was when he was working for the Hoofer Chemical Company up in Niagara Falls. people were making caustic soda and fluorine, and they were breathing all this fluorine. So Leo went to the top echelon of the company and said it's worth spending a little more money on your employees' health. Please help improve the air quality in the plant.
Yeah.
So he was very conscious of the workers in his own plant and other plants around the world.
I love that.
Yeah, I'd be very curious to see how he would react to the yin yang of modern plastic, all the wonderful stuff. Look at COVID. Look at this plastic has kept COVID from us. All the plexiglass and the face shields, all that stuff is largely plastic. So that helped us out a lot. But then the other side of it is this mountain of crap that we've got that we have to deal with. And, you know, that's going to be a big challenge.
Right. And it goes back to that same question, like, how does the material want to be used?
Right.
And it's the difficulty too, right? Of the where the product starts with the designer. You know, they might design it for one use, like the person who designed the plastic bag, you know, wanted to have it, you know, it was the key was that it was reusable. You didn't have to, you know, the bag wouldn't break.
Right.
And we completely abuse it now.
We need to educate the new scientists coming up. SPE has this program called PlastChicks. And maybe you can explain a little bit about that, because our film we're involved with PlastChicks through one of your associates at SPE.
Yeah, so with Plastivan, it's part of the SP Foundation, which is the charitable arm of the Society of Plastics Engineers. And what I love about Plastivan, so Eve Vitale is, you know, responsible for the, you know, curriculum and getting it out there. And
we interviewed her, I think, in the second or third episode of a podcast, actually. But
yeah,
so if you want, you can go back to the archives if you want to hear about it.
And our quality of podcasting has improved since then. But you know, basically they go out to schools and, you know, educate students, you know, for the day, or they'll do like special events for like parents sometimes afterwards. And they've actually, as of recently, created a new sustainability, you know, curriculum that could, you know, either be used with concurrently or totally separate. And they've started rolling that out to some schools, and it's really well received because a lot of these students, you know, number one, they don't realize how much plastic's in. You know, Eve will say, your shirt right there, that's, you know, Eve or the other educators will say, your shirt includes plastic, and the kids will be like, what? You know, or they'll be like, okay, let's, you know, see if nobody bring any plastic in here. And the kids are all like super confident. And it's like, everything, you know, your shoes, your shirt, your, you know, your phone, your whatever. And these kids are kind of blown away by it. But then even the sustainability, it's that education on, you know, we don't want to tell you plastics is bad. That's not what plastics is. That's like saying, you know, wood's bad because it gives you splinters, or, you know, it's the education on how you use it, what we do with it, you know, making sure you're responsible in your part. And, you know, Plastivan is easily rented for like local schools, or and they'll go out and go to different schools and different events. And it's just I can't speak enough good things about it. So I'll probably just
we've brought it, and the way that I mean, you know, the SPE itself, you know, all the different technical divisions and geographic sections, you know, a lot of I know for the culinary appearance division, you know, we donate a ton to bring Plastivan to schools, you know, so even though the cost of Plastivan is what, like is it $1,500 per day of it's typically all covered by you know, by the association, and also by, you know, sponsors, you know, locally and globally. So it's really, really incredible, because yeah, my kids, I mean, learn about plastics just from me talking too much, but their classmates never would have. And so we brought that to Chicago Public School for 3-4 years in a row now. Pretty exciting.
Great.
So, so we're just about out of time. But tell us, where can we start streaming the film?
We're going to be up on iTunes, Apple TV Plus, Google Play, YouTube, and Vudu Domestic starting June 29th. And you can actually pre-order on iTunes now. But we're going to be out in five languages internationally. And there's also a 21-minute version, educational one. The film is an hour long, but we also did a 21-minute educational version that still has most of the jokes in it. So it should be entertaining even in a classroom environment.
Awesome.
Very cool. And rumor has it there's also going to be some kind of event in the future.
Yeah,
Or
hopefully.
can we not talk about that yet?
Yeah, it's in there. There's a couple things in development.
Okay.
Maybe we can tell them we are just finishing up a little sidecar, a caboose movie called The Story of Bakelite, which is John K. Mumford's an adaptation of a wonderful little book that was written by John K. Mumford in 1925 that extols the wonder of Bakelite. You know, Bakelite. What does he say? Bakelite, the material that makes metal ashamed of itself. The writing is.
I'm going to use that phrase.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's almost done, and it's going to come out soon. Marty is finishing up the music on that. Again, an original score, and we have the wonderful voice of John McDonough. He's almost like an Orson Welles type, Orson Wellian voiceover. So that's coming. That'll be out and available.
It'll be on our website.
Be on the website. Yeah.
Thingsbakelite.com.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. It's like a little appetizer.
and our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
The LH Bakeland project.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all
You know,
things-
talking about what would a world without Bakelite look like if the Bakelite had never existed, you know, I just like Lynzie. So Lynzie, you know, Lynzie and I are very, very good friends. And Lynzie, if Bakelite had never existed, we might not ever have met.
rude.
I asked the scientist, you know, how could you make a car without plastic? And they went back and forth and they said, well, I guess you could using these items and wood for this and something else, but it was going to be very
Hard
tough. What's that?
Hard rubber.
Yeah, hard.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly today, plastics make automotive a lot more fuel efficient, a lot better for the environment.
yeah.
And I would be unemployed without plastics. So
Yeah, well, yeah, yes. So thank you to your great grandfather for
yeah.
giving us both careers that we love so much.
Too. I hope the whole world sees the movie and understands where plastic came from.
Well, we will definitely be pushing on our end because we're
Thank you.
blessed.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, guys. It was an absolute honor to have you both here. And I'm sure we'll be in touch. And yeah, so June 29th,
Yep.
All Things Bakelite will be streaming on all the listed platforms. So make sure to check that out. And this episode will actually be released on July 2nd, whatever that Friday is.
So yeah, that's the quickest turnaround time for us.
So, all right. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
It was
Yeah.
great to meet you too.
In a cyber kind of way.
Yeah.
Uh,